Welcome to the Power Quadrant System course. By the end of this course, it is my intention that you will have experienced a number of aha moments, transformational moments if you want, that will redefine how you look at yourself, how you understand your role in this world, your gifts, and what it will take for you to create what you want out of this life. In addition, you will also understand more about other people and their roles, why they think the way they do, how they see the world the way they do, why they act the way they do, and why even some people tend to simply rub you the wrong way, and you them. As part of this course, there is a small workbook. Nothing complex or lengthy. It's not difficult or time-consuming, which means there's not a reason in the world you shouldn't take a few extra minutes and actually do it as you go through the course. Go ahead and open it now. Answer the first few sections on your personal and professional life now. Go ahead, pause this, take a few minutes to jot down the answers, and go. It'll be well worth your effort, I promise you that. So if you haven't already done that, go ahead and pause it and then come back. Okay, great. You're back. Let's talk about self-knowledge versus skill knowledge. See, as we go through this course, the answers that you just put down to those questions will help you give some incredible insights into yourself and others that will affect everything you do, how you do it, and who you even do it with. Big promises, I know. But the knowledge I'm about to share has done that for me and my wife Liz, as well as many others who have tapped into the knowledge in this course. Let me take just a minute and give you a big picture of what we're going to cover before we get to the real meat of the program. Now let me say that again. Let me take just a minute and give you a big picture of what we're going to cover before we get into the real meat of the program. Stop right there and make a note in your workbook. Are you briefly annoyed by having to deal with the big picture, or does that excite you? I don't mean to frustrate you, but that answer, too, will give you some clues as to many different aspects of yourself. I know it sounds odd, but trust me. So jot that down in your workbook. All right, so back to the big picture, self-knowledge versus skill knowledge. The Power Quadrant System is all about self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is knowledge centered about you, who you are, how best you operate, how you think. It's getting more clear on how powerful you are, what your strengths are, even possibly what your role in this life is supposed to be. Skill knowledge is where you're being taught by someone else how to do something. It adds to your knowledge about how to affect the world around you. Skill knowledge is critical to achieving results that you want. But self-knowledge is an amplifier that can drastically improve the speed, the ease, and the overall results of the skills you're looking to gain. Without the self-knowledge, it's easy to get caught up in focusing on things you shouldn't be focused on, or trying to learn things that are not aligned with your strengths, or trying to learn in ways that don't match how you learn. And by knowing yourself better, you'll get far better results. So, if you want to get far more out of everything you're already doing, you're in the right place. The Power Quadrant System is many different things on many levels. But the place to start to understand this is to treat it as a system that explains how something goes from idea to creation, from concept to manifestation. To understand what the Power Quadrant System does is to think of a project that you're currently working on. It can be anything you want. Go ahead and pick something you're doing at work, in your business, or maybe even as simple as a craft project with one of your kids. Every project starts with an idea, a magical burst of creative energy. It's a formless, exciting, high-energy thought. Wouldn't it be cool if, hey, I could do this. I'll start a business. I'll create a blog. I'll adopt a pet. Usually the idea is surrounded by statements like, wouldn't it be great because then this would happen, or if I did this, then I'd have that. Big picture type stuff, right? Broad statements, ideas, concepts. That's the red Power Quadrant. It initiates, okay? It's creative, it's exciting, it's magical, it's big picture thinking. No details, no how-to, pure, formless idea creation. This is where everything starts. Everything that eventually comes to fruition starts with an idea, or as Napoleon Hill says, ideas are the beginning points of all fortunes. But to make that project manifest, to turn it from the idea stage to actual reality, it has to go through 3 more steps. Or, as Buddha would put it, an idea that is developed and put into action is more important than an idea that exists only as an idea. And that next step in the process is the white power quadrant. Okay? In this phase, the refining phase, it goes from a formless, non-structured idea to something that is starting to take shape, where the big picture starts to gain structure and priorities. If we're to create the idea started in the red quadrant, then here are the big things that have to happen. And here's what's the most important things to do first. If your project is to start a business, then you start picturing the major pieces of that. To start my business, I'll need a place to work. I'll need to handle legal and financial stuff. I'll need to create sales. I'll need to handle customer service. Still big picture concepts, but your idea is starting to take shape, to take form. Again, this is where the idea is refined and priorities start getting established. After that happens, now the details can start to emerge. This is the blue power quadrant. As the idea goes around the circle, from red to white and now to blue, it takes on more form, more structure. The idea is transformed in this quadrant. This is where things get far more specific. You'll start working out those concrete steps that need to be done to create those higher level things. The specific action steps you need to take, what you'll need to obtain, who you have to talk to, everything that needs to be actually done. Then, after the action tasks and this more detailed planning is done, comes the final phase, the yellow power quadrant. This is where the execution work gets done. The idea is manifested. Things are built. Sales calls are made. Orders are handled. All the action steps are taken to finally bring things full circle from the exciting idea to actual reality. From a project planning perspective, you aren't going to find a much more clear model to follow than the power quadrant system. But my guess is you're asking, what does this have to do with me? And my answer to that is everything. You see, if you start digging deeper into this, you'll realize that each of the 4 quadrants are 4 distinct roles that need to be played. Let's take a step back. Do you know someone that is always full of creative ideas, easily sees connections that others miss, but when it comes to actually getting them done, tends to be scattered and all over the place? That's someone who falls into the red quadrant. What about someone who's brilliant at breaking down the big picture so that other people can start to see what's truly going on? That's a white. Blue is someone who's wonderful at the details. They can break things down, all their component parts, to really see what makes everything tick. And then the yellows are geniuses at getting things done. Point them in the right direction, then get out of their way. Now, let's be clear. All of us can play all 4 roles if we have to. If we have to. We can all have great, exciting ideas. And we can all take them through all the way to completion. If we're willing to work hard enough and force things through the 4 quadrants. But our natural strengths and gifts are going to fall into one of those 4 quadrants. And once we know what we're supposed to be doing, where we're supposed to be focused, it changes everything we do, from what we do to how we do it, to who we connect with and how we connect with them. We have a natural role to play that focuses on only one of the 4 quadrants. We're not meant to take it all alone. We're meant to be part of the process. And the first step is understanding the quadrant you're in. So let's get into more details. If you look at the whole power quadrant system, the first thing you need to understand is that it's a cycle. Red flows into white, which flows into blue, which flows into yellow. Then the yellow, where details are being handled, can actually spawn off great ideas, building a better mousetrap, if you will. So yellow ends up flowing into red in a non-stop, ever-growing cycle. The second thing is that each quadrant is equal in size. That's because each is as important as the others to the bringing of a project into reality. What that means is this. Maybe you've been criticized for being a scattered person who doesn't get things done, doesn't follow up on great ideas. Well, if you're red, you're not supposed to be a detailed person. That's literally not who you are. You don't think that way. But you do need to find others that can take your ideas and move them through the rest of the 4 quadrants. Perhaps you're someone who's used to working at the big picture level and people accuse you of being upper management, who doesn't like to get their hands dirty. Well, if you're a white, you're not going to be at your best working with the details. You're best when someone hands you a cool idea and lets you get the ball rolling on it. If you're so into arranging details, you may forget the big picture. Well, welcome to the club. You're a blue. That's what I am. So I'm great at bottom-up type thinking in details, but not so good at keeping the big picture. As an example, one simple way it shows up is that I'm horrible at navigation. I'm a great driver, but if I'm not 100% focused, like if I'm in a conversation with a passenger, I'm likely to miss my turn. And it takes me driving to the same place a dozen times before I'm really sure I know how to get there. When someone gives me directions, I need landmarks. I need step-by-step, detail-oriented directions walking me through where I need to go from where I started to where I end up, right? Whites and reds can look at the big picture. They can basically keep a map in their head, so navigation is easy for them. Blues are best when they're handed a clear, high-level goal and asked to start making it real, breaking it all down to the details that need to be handled to actually create the step-by-step processes. As for yellows, you are all about the details. Your creative genius lies in simply getting things done. Give you a list and then get out of your way because the dust is about to fly, and it's going to get done faster, easier, and better than others around you. On the other hand, since you see all the details, it can be hard to prioritize which details are more important right now. It looks like all one big to-do list. So each of the 4 quadrants have strengths and weaknesses. They are all different but equal in the process of turning an idea from concept to creation. Let's go over some of the big traits that stand out to help you identify where you fall into the 4 power quadrants. The left half of the power quadrant system is more about non-structured, non-linear thinking. By nature, reds and yellows look at everything at one level. Everything is equal as everything else. It's very creative and flowing. The right side, the right half, is very structured. Whites and blues are there to provide the layers, the levels, and finer distinctions needed to create priorities. If you want to do this, then you need to do these things. They can take the formless and put them form to them. Linear thinking, step 1, step 2, step 3. So what do you tend to do? Again, not saying you can't think both ways. I'm asking, what way do you tend to do more often? What's your natural state? Jot this down in your workbook. This is going to be important for you. Now, the top half of the power quadrant system is very big picture oriented. They see the wholeness of things. They view things from a top-down perspective. They're able to see how everything interconnects and relates at a very top level, a very high level. The bottom half, the lower half of the circle, looks at the details of everything. They look at things from a bottom-up perspective. Let me give you an example. My wife Liz is a white, so she sees and thinks top-down. I'm a blue, I see things from the bottom up. So we were talking about getting a bit more organized and prioritized in our business recently. We do a lot of different projects in our multiple companies, and we felt like we were getting too scattered. So it was time to get more focused. First of all, if you're a red or a yellow, I may have totally lost you here. Blues and whites are typically far more into structure and priorities, remember? So as we move forward, Liz wanted to list out all of our divisions and then fill in the details of what each division was doing, how profitable it was, etc. Very top-down thinking. She was looking at the whole picture, then go down into big chunks of it. I wanted to create a list of all the projects and their results, then group them into divisions once we saw what we have. Very bottom-up thinking. We compromised, of course, by each doing it our own way and then comparing notes. Otherwise, we would have argued about the best way all day long, simply because we were both right. For us, each way was the best because of the quadrant that we are in. Overall, being honest, whites are the best at creating big structure and priorities, so I should have just shut up and listened. But sometimes it's difficult to remember when you're not the best person for the job because I could have done it. It just wouldn't be as easy for me, and while it would have worked, it just would have taken longer, right? So how about you? Do you tend to look at the big picture and go down from there, or do you tend to look at the bottom, at the details, and go up from there? Obviously, put your answer there in your workbook, okay? So my guess is, so far, you're starting to get some idea of what quadrant you're naturally in. But for some people, this can be a very difficult process. And we'll discuss why in a bit. For now, I want to share one last way to look at the power quadrant system to help you determine what quadrant you fit into best, okay? You see, sometimes the best way to figure out what we are is to help define what we are not. So if we know what we have the most difficulty with, then that will help define what we aren't. So if you go across the circle, if you go across the power quadrant system here, you'll see that the quadrant opposite yours is typically where you have the most challenges with. So for a red, as someone who sees the whole formless big picture at once, working with a blue who specializes in dealing with the details and creating structures and processes can be almost painful. As an example, I got a red client that was having me help move her business forward by adding in some more systems for more leverage when it comes to sales, increasing sales that they didn't have to actively work for. It was something the red client was very excited to have. And when it came time to really get into the details of creating that system, she had to get off the phone and let her assistant handle the details. You see, where my magic as blue was shining, breaking things down to action steps that her team could do, it drove her nuts. And in return, it drives me nuts that the red is always looking to do new things instead of creating systems that run automatically. I prefer systems you can build once and enjoy the results of from a long time afterwards. And even more to the point, I enjoy building them. My wife, Liz, again who's a white, absolutely hates the day-to-day tasks that need to happen. It drives her nuts to be forced into the role of a yellow. Nothing will ruin her day faster. Now, I'm not fond of those tasks myself, and you may not be either. But that's why we got into having a staff and outsourcing very early on in our business career. We had to have that yellow role filled. And we found out that it's far better in many cases to have me, as a blue, handle the go-between between her and the staff. We don't do this all the time, obviously, but most of the times it just flows better when I translate her white thinking and style into a style that the yellows can be more empowered to act on. So as you look at the circle, if you can identify what quadrant seems to cause the most friction with the way you think and work, that could be a great way to identify what quadrant you're in. So go to your workbook and jot down what you feel is the quadrant you're least suited for. What causes the most friction? What stirs up feelings of annoyance or irritation? What do you tend to have the most challenges with? Obviously, the first thing people focus on is what quadrant they are in and what that means for them. So let's dig into this a bit more at the big picture level, which what all you whites and you reds enjoy so much. Understand that every project, every initiative requires all four roles to be played. You should only be one. Each of the four quadrants play a critical part of the process. Now, it's possible that you don't have much choice and that you've been playing all four roles up to now. As a matter of fact, this is one of the biggest problems for people trying to figure out who they really are. Because if you're someone who's been trying to do a role that isn't aligned with your quadrant, it can really bring some stress and friction into your life. So the first step is to understand who you are, what quadrant you're in. Then you need to understand that if you can bring on other people into your team, whether it's staff, partners, or advisors that help play the other three roles, you'll go much farther, much faster. Look at what each of the four roles provide and decide for yourself where things are the weak point there, and let that be where you start. Also, I wouldn't suggest starting with your opposite. If you're a one-man show or a one-woman show right now, start with someone whose color is compatible with you. And by compatible, I mean different, but next to yours. So look again at the power quadrant system. Okay, if you're a red, don't rush out to get a blue. If you're a white, don't rush out to get a yellow. Yes, those roles are critical, especially for you, since they're opposite of what you are, and therefore provide a big missing piece. But they will also typically be the most challenging for you. If you've got other roles already filled, great. Just fill what you haven't yet. But if you're just starting out, get a role filled that's next to yours in the chart so they provide value and help things move forward, but that you're likely going to have a much more luck in naturally understanding how they think and communicate. And then when you do fill in that opposite color, that challenge role, just keep in mind how different they do think by referring back to the chart. Now that you've got a clear idea of what the four quadrants are, how they work together, it's time to start applying the knowledge. You'll find that the concepts in the power quadrant system can be applied to almost every area of your life. Every day you're part of the creation process. Every day you're involved in life moving forward, creation occurring, ideas going from concept to creation, whether it's things you're specifically trying to accomplish, your role at your job or your business, helping your kids with schoolwork, lending a hand to a neighbor, or a million other things. Every day you're communicating with others, which means how they think and see the world has a direct impact on how you and they communicate. And communication is key to everything you do. As an example, let me point out something that I've seen over and over again, something I think we all have suffered from and perpetuated. This little tip can be huge for your life as a whole, so listen up. Have you or your ideas or your attempts at communication ever been dismissed or minimized or maybe even ridiculed by others? Have you perhaps done this to others? What I see over and over again is that when people who are thinking totally differently, friction occurs. People don't usually understand that there are different ways to think of things. There are multiple perspectives that can be taken, different ways of handling the same problem. A blue may dismiss the perceived flightiness of the red. The yellow may think a white is wasting time on broad topics that have no application. The red may think the blue is too wrapped up in details to get the big picture. The white may think the yellow is too simple to see what's important. If you think about this, you can easily imagine times when this has probably occurred with you. Either times that you've personally experienced this from others or that you've put onto someone else. Write some times down that this has happened to you and some times that maybe you've done this to others. By having you understand how you think and what role you play, it helps to understand when others are frustrated with you because they think very differently. It would be nice if they were a bit more gracious about it, but just by knowing that they literally don't think like you and can't truly understand how you think, it helps to shed light on the friction that's there. And the more you understand how others think, and that they think totally different from you, and that it's perfectly okay for them to do so, you've just got a long way to improving every communication you have. By understanding that other people play different roles in life, that their strengths are different quadrants, and that their quadrant is just as critical as yours is, even if it's totally opposite, acceptance can occur. You don't need to fight them or change them. You now know how better to work with them. And on that note, let's talk about your personal relationships. How much more powerful are your communications going to be with people you live with, work with, your family, and everyone else around you once you start paying attention to what power quadrant they're in? You've probably heard a million times about how important communication is, and I agree. But if you know how the other person is going to naturally think and perceive things, even if you can't do it that way yourself, you'll find a much deeper understanding and respect for the other person. It's not just about communication. It's about understanding on a subconscious basis. They don't even need to know anything about the power quadrant system, but since you do, it will become much easier to communicate in ways that other people understand and for them to understand you. Respect stems from understanding, and your respect level for everyone around you will instantly go up because you now understand the role they are supposed to play in things, and that each role is equal to all other roles. The change that will occur in every area of your life from this can be incredible, and I look forward to hearing from you how it's affected your life. As you go through this course and apply it, email me your stories and let me know. If there's an aha you received already in this course, jot it down in your workbook now in that last section. Another area that tends to greatly improve with the deeper understanding of the power quadrant system is that you now have the freedom to more deeply understand and accept the gifts that you have. Not everyone thinks like you, sees the world as you do, can achieve the outcomes that you do. And while I won't get into a lot of details here, just understand that not all people who are in the same power quadrant are the same. There are many finer distinctions that help separate us. Think of each color as a full spectrum. You could be a red, but be closer to the yellow side of the power quadrant. Or you could be at the other end of the red spectrum next to the white. This is also a reason why some people can have challenges in determining exactly what power quadrant they are in. Someone who's a red, but is in the slice right next to the white, will find priorities and structures far easier than a red who's in that slice right next to the yellow. A blue who's right next to white will have a far easier time looking at the big structure of things, but more of a challenge with the ongoing execution, getting it done stage. So no, not all blues work or think exactly the same, but understand that your natural tendencies will be dominated by one of the four quadrants. And that's typically easiest to work and communicate with others in the same quadrant, even if they are closer to another quadrant than you are. So here's the big takeaway from this. Once you understand that you think, act, and behave differently from many, many other people for a reason, it becomes much easier to have confidence in who you are and what you have to offer. Yes, it is absolutely unconscious for you. It is easy for you. It is who you are. But it's not for others. It's part of your gifts, part of your strengths. So respect them. Understand that others can't do what you do, and frankly, at times, don't even understand what it is that you offer. If you think of people in the opposite quadrant you're in, that could be the case. But you know that all of that is okay. It's the way things are supposed to be. Again, there's more to gain from the power quadrant system when it comes to fully understanding who you are and what you have to offer. That could be an incredibly positive effect on your confidence, but you need to absorb everything here before you move on, because there's a ton being thrown at you right now. So stop for a minute and write down what you know about how you think and act. What are your tendencies? What color do you think you are? Later on, I'll give you an easy way to figure it out, but for now, just write down your impressions. So go ahead, just jot down your first instinct: red, white, blue, or yellow. Ready? Good. Okay, at this point, you've learned the overview of the four power quadrant system. You've got an understanding of how they each contribute a unique role. You probably have a good idea of what you are and how it's affected your communications and relationships. Now let's dig more into roles versus people. Many people may not still fully understand what color they are, because they play a role in life that's different than their color. It can be very confusing and frustrating because what you do doesn't match who you are. Lots of people are like this. So ask yourself some questions. In your business or in your job, what is your role like? What color would you objectively define it as in terms of the power quadrant system? Is it a high-level idea creation role, a red role? Is it a refining role that starts to add form to those high-level ideas, a white role? Is it more of a transforming role, granular and defining tasks, a blue role? Or are you simply given clear direction and you just need to execute or manifest, a yellow role? So based on what you know right now, what would you say your role is from a work or career perspective? Now take a few minutes and let's be objective. What challenges do you have with your current role? What frustrates you? What would you change about it? Go back to the workbook, to some of the first questions you answered there if you want a chance to add more now and flesh it out. You see, sometimes great clues to understanding yourself can come from understanding where the friction lies. Remember, the opposite color can create a lot of stress or friction. So you may get clues here as to the nature of your roles, or even the roles of the people you directly work with because of what drives you crazy. After you've jotted down the biggest things, let's go on to the next step with this. Ready? What this roles versus people conversation means for business or projects you're involved with can be huge. So you know about the 4 quadrants. You know the basic aspects of each quadrant. You may even have an idea of what quadrant you are, or at least what quadrant's role you take for your work. But what if the business or the project you work in is actually very small? What if it's just you and you're it? Let's take a slightly different look at the 4 quadrants and how they can be applied. First, remember that you don't have a choice. All 4 quadrants get utilized in the process of going from idea to reality. You can't skip a quadrant. If you have a partner, maybe you've got 2 of the quadrants covered. Maybe you have an assistant that handles one of those quadrants for you. But if you are gaining some understanding of the power quadrant system, you are seeing far more clearly that most people who are trying to accomplish things in life don't have them all done. Because if you are truly getting what the 4 quadrants are about, if you understand that all 4 quadrants are required, that all are equally important and can't be ignored, then you can now identify what is arguably the biggest challenges people face in achieving anything. That 9 times out of 10, all 4 quadrants aren't being properly handled. If all 4 quadrants are being addressed in your project or business, then you'll be experiencing an incredible flow of things going from concept to creation. If that process is choppy, if it seems like so little progress is being made, even if you're working your heart out, then now you know why. This has been a huge area of ahas for the entrepreneurs I've taught this to. There tends to be a myth that we can do it alone, or that we must do it alone. In reality, your strengths are best suited for only 25% of what needs to get done. For instance, I've mentioned before that I'm a blue, my wife Liz is a white. So one of the first things we did in business was to put together a team of people to do the day-to-day work. We're great at creating systems and then turning it over to our team. That team handles the yellow quadrant. Without that team, we can get very frustrated by having to be the ones that handle all the day-to-day tasks. For the red quadrant that we have to fulfill, we turn to other solutions to get great ideas. Books, programs, and courses that help spawn ideas. Brainstorming and mastermind sessions with other people. I'll cover this more below, but the point is, without handling all 4 quadrants in some way, we wouldn't be anywhere near as successful as we have been. As an example, a husband-wife couple I've been coaching are a red-yellow pair. They have incredible ideas, but then tend to bog down in handling all the details. There's little to no priorities on what's the most important. That's the white role. Or in creating systems to organize it all. That's the blue role. As you can imagine, with what they're offering to the world, they should be phenomenally successful. But in reality, they're only enjoying a fraction of success they should be. A business owner I know brought on an assistant. The owners are red, the assistants are white. They work well together, and have brought on a few people to help handle the yellow roles of doing things. They're having success. but everything is brand new every time. There are no systems, no standard operating procedures that can really make things flow faster and easier. Financially, they should be seeing 10 times the revenue they're bringing now. Another business owner I'm coaching is a blue and brought in a red to help, since somehow he knew instinctively that he needed help in that big picture level. The result was an explosion of ideas of where things could go, and they're super busy trying to create systems out of all of it. But since the white isn't there to prioritize what's more important right now, revenues actually dropped, even though the creative magic level that was added was tremendous, and they're creating more than they ever had before. There's an entrepreneur I know who's a red. He has a challenge in even communicating his ideas to other people. He sees things at such a high level and connects dots from idea to idea that most people can barely even begin to see. People see him as something of a mad genius because he can't break down the big picture at all and tries to communicate it all at once, like a big fire hose. Actually getting his ideas across and into action are bordering on impossible for him personally. Without a team around him to handle those 4 quadrants, he doesn't get far. In the past, when he's had a team, he's made hundreds of millions of dollars. By himself, he's struggling. Financially, personally, emotionally. Maybe you can relate. So you don't have any choice. You must address all 4 quadrants if you want to more easily achieve the results you are seeking. This is fundamental to everything you're doing right now. But if you're just one person, how do you make sure all 4 quadrants are handled? Most of us start out alone. Even if you're blessed to have a great partner who's working with you, you need to have all 4 quadrants addressed. Let's take this one quadrant at a time. The red quadrant process. It's all about the magical creation of ideas. Big thinking, reaching for new things. You may not be a red, so this may not come fully natural to you. You may not also have a red on your team. So a way to handle the red quadrant process is brainstorming or masterminding. Now, if you're groaning, it's probably because you're not familiar with the right way to brainstorm, or you're a blue, and it really just goes against your nature. Brainstorming can be done by anyone. Is it better in a small group? It can be, especially if you have a red in the group. The way to do this is to clearly identify what problem you're trying to solve. What challenge do you want to overcome? Then just bounce ideas around, not getting bogged down in the details, not worrying about how to make those ideas happen. Just start writing down a list of ideas, no matter how crazy. A long list. It doesn't even have to be done all in one session if you want. If you need a break and to come back later to add more, fine. Especially if you're not a red, this can be challenging, but it can be done by anyone. We'll get to what you do with this idea list in a minute, but understand that no matter who is doing the brainstorming, the process itself is a red process. It kicks off the cycle. If you've got a larger business and you create a small panel to solve a problem, no matter what power quadrants they are in individually, a brainstorming session is a red process. Yes, some people will do it better than others, but it can be done. Do you spend time reading books or courses or programs? Frequently, you'll pick up huge ideas that others have shared that can be acted on by you to achieve huge results. In short, be conscious that the red quadrant needs to be addressed. And if it's not covered internally by you or someone you work with, go outside of the box and look for ideas from others that you can bring into your business. Now, the next step in the process is obviously a white one. It's time to start adding some structure to those ideas, refining them, prioritizing what's important right now. That's what is performed here. Take a look at each idea. What are the major components of each idea? What ideas are more important? What ones are more likely? Think refinement. Think bridge between idea and the beginnings of the work needed to create the idea. Some people like tools like mind maps here, or flowcharts. Tools that can help identify the major components that make up the idea, but don't get bogged down in details. We're still operating at a high level, looking top down. So if it's just you, lean on tools like that to help you move that idea into execution. If you've got others, get them to mind map it or flow chart it out. That's the white quadrant. If you still struggle here, get a business consultant. someone who specializes in looking at your whole business and can organize it for you. Develop some high-level systems and metrics. There's a whole industry out there of business consultants that can help you with this. If you must handle it internally, team up people from other colors that are more compatible with whites. Get some blues and some reds together, but by all means, do not ask a yellow to do a white job. It simply won't get done. If you don't have someone who's naturally a white, understand that while your results may be the best, as long as you are somehow addressing this white level, your results will be far greater than if you're simply ignoring it. Again, you may not need to have a white on your team permanently, but somehow this white role has to be handled. The blue quadrant process. So after that high-level organization has occurred, maybe it's a chart, a mind map, a flow chart, whatever, the next step is to go from the high-level components in that flow chart into actual task lists. Think systems. Think to-do lists. This is what needs to happen here. One tool that has been incredibly successful here for me personally are standard operating procedures, or SOPs. It's a military term that basically means that each time a certain task is performed, it's done in a certain way every time. First you do this, then you do this, then you do this. Templates that have you make things look the same way. Step-by-step procedures that define what needs to get done for a task. To-do lists or action lists. All of these things are what need to be created at this stage. Very detail-oriented, very bottom-up thinking. If you're trying to build that building, you have to dig the foundation first, is how the blue process goes. If you're a red, this quadrant will be just about impossible for you. Whites can have forced you, you're brought down to this level of detail, but frankly, why? Frequently, blues are available as contract workers, assistants, employees, and as you tell them what you want done, you simply ask them to document how they go about doing it. What's the system behind what they do? The yellow quadrant process. This is the final step. So, of course, this is where those action lists, those standard operating procedures, get used to create the final output, and where the whole process can be manifested with better ways to do what needs to be done. So it's not just about doing the work, it's about focusing on how the work is getting done. You want the work to be done and feedback on how it can be approved. Checklists are in this stage to keep track, but also things like after-action reports, post-event feedback and analysis, memos to upper management on cost or time-saving ideas. If you're playing the role of a yellow here, you don't just get the work done. You do your best to understand how you're getting work done and how it could be better. Now, the most obvious solution here is to get assistants, staff, employees, whatever, to handle the work, and be open to how they suggest actually doing the work. This is their area. As long as what they are working on has been prioritized by a white and further transformed by the blue, the yellows are going to rock in manifesting exactly what is needed. As a side note, if you're a yellow and it's your business, you still typically want to bring in a team, because while you'll want to focus on all the details of the whole business, you don't have enough time in the day to do it all. So while it can be a challenge to give up some of the responsibilities because you know you can do it better than other people, you really can't if you have to do it all yourself. So that's the whole cycle or process. But remember that the whole power quadrant system is actually a circle. So the yellow processes feed naturally into red. It's not just about execution, it's also about creatively executing, finding new ways and better ways to get things done, or finding unexpected challenges that have to be brainstormed on before they can be solved. Remember, a circle has no end. It just keeps going around and around. It's a never-ending process. So if you're starting out doing it all by yourself, just be clear on what each quadrant requires and do your best to get it done. If you can start building a team or staff, hopefully you now understand better what has to happen for a clear flow to go from idea to creation. And most of all, hopefully you understand far more about who you are, what your strengths and gifts are, and where you most naturally fit in. Right now, take a moment and jot down what ahas you gained through this past section. Whatever your project or business is, Are you experiencing challenges? Why? Do you understand more clearly the true nature of those problems? What can you do to resolve them? Take as much time as you need before you move on to the final section. All right. Now it's time to get into the origins of what I call the power quadrant system. And in so doing, make it very clear what your true nature is. I have to warn you that this part is not for everyone. You have the right to dismiss all or a part of what I'm about to tell you. It's definitely not something that modern mainstream society sees or understands. So at this point, you have a choice. You can take what you have learned so far and stop. You already know how powerful that information is, and you've probably already seen a difference already in how you will think and perceive and communicate with others. You can stop here and walk away with a great deal of knowledge and insight you didn't have before, a gift that can forever impact your life on a daily basis. But if you'd like to know the full story, the incredible, mind-bending details of where this all started, then continue reading. But remember, I warned you. What I call the power quadrant system is based on a system of knowledge that is thousands of years old, compiled by a society that knew about the number 0 long before civilizations in the Middle East did. It created a calendar more accurate than the Gregorian calendar we use today, built structures larger than the pyramids of Egypt, and their direct descendants are still around today. I'm talking about the ancient civilization of the Maya. Most people are familiar with the Maya only from what they've heard about the hocus pocus surrounding the Mayan calendar ending in 2012. And while this course isn't on the Mayan calendar, I want to at least give you the basics so you understand it and how it led to the creation of the power quadrant system. First, understand that all calendars, like all calendars, the Mayan calendar system works like a series of interlocking wheels or gears. Think of a clock. When a minute ticks off every 60 seconds, that minute ends and the next minute begins. After 60 minutes, that current hour ends and the next hour begins. After 24 hours, the day ends and a new one starts. And those measurements of time are based on the movement of the Earth around the Sun. Every 24 hours, the Earth is spun around with the side of the Earth facing the Sun, the daytime, and the side of the Earth facing away from the Sun is nighttime. I don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence here. I know you've heard all this many times in school growing up, but it's important to put things in a frame of reference because the Mayan didn't end with a second, minute, hour, day cycle. They had much larger cycles too. Though their months are measured differently, they had 13 in a year, closely followed by the moon. Their annual cycle, what we call a year, was actually more accurate than ours. They also had larger cycles, multi-year cycles, cycles even large enough to be thousands of years long. That's what the whole 2012 thing is all about. The end of one of those cycles as it turns over to start a new one, just like one day turns over into the next. So once you understand that time is nothing more than the understanding of where our planet Earth resides in relation to other physical bodies in the universe, you start to see how time came to be measured. You see, if you observe the skies long enough, patterns start to emerge. Predictable patterns. Patterns that can be measured and quantified. You know how much daylight is left or when the next full moon will be. All based on repeated observation over a long period of time. And with all this observation, you start to see trends and patterns, not just in the skies, but in the world around you, in the people you deal with. Today, a lot of people talk about the power of the moon on people's behavior. Think of things like, it's a full moon, the crazies are out. If you chat with nurses at hospitals, police, or firefighters, a lot of them can tell you stories of some rather different things that have happened around a full moon. Well, what the Mayans found out is that if you pay attention long enough, you'll start to see other patterns emerge consistent with other times. If you're beginning to think this sounds like astrology, you'd be right. But an astrological system, unique and independent from what most people think of astrology today, and one of very predictive qualities. You see, according to the Mayan system, your color is dependent upon when you were born, the results of influences from the exact time you were born. And yes, I got the colors straight from them: red, white, blue, and yellow. My wife and I have been intrigued by the Mayans for almost 9 years now. We've had a ton of books and DVDs on them. I've been fortunate enough to interview personally some of the world's top experts on the Maya. We've been able to go to a number of Mayan ruins in Belize and Guatemala, including some that are definitely not on the typical tourist trail. We've even had a chance to chat with some of the modern-day descendants of this incredible civilization. And we've seen some very cool sites done by other experts. I'll give you a couple of URLs here, there on the screen to take a look at. By going to those sites, you can plug in your birth date, and they'll let you know what your color is, and more details that I'm not going to go into here. The only thing to add here is that the Maya day is from sunset to sunset. So if you were born at night, your true Maya birthday is actually the next calendar day. In other words, if you were born on May 11th, but at 8 p.m. at night, your Mayan birthday would be considered May 12th. So go check it out and explore. And please understand what I'm sharing here is just a simplified fraction of their system and what it has to offer. It took them a long time to put all their observations together, and frankly, the experts are still trying to decipher it and put it all together today. The big takeaway for me has always been how to apply the knowledge that does exist. What does it mean I'm a certain color? What are the traits of that? What makes other people different? How can I relate and communicate more effectively with them? Regardless of whether or not you're intrigued by the source of the information behind the power quadrant system, I encourage you to apply it if you haven't started to already. It simply makes sense. People relate to it. The bottom line is, it works. It's a system that has made sense and provided value to people for thousands of years. I'm not asking you to become a believer in ancient knowledge, not even this ancient knowledge. All I ask is that you give it a shot. If what you have learned up to now makes sense to you, use it. You can worry about the source of the material some other time. After all, it's not what I think, it's what really works for you in your life. So congratulations again on learning about the power quadrant system and starting to apply it. If even just a fraction of what it means is applied, you'll see some significant impacts in all areas of your life. Remember, while knowledge is important, applied knowledge is the true goal. So go out there and start using what you've learned. And I look forward to hearing what differences it makes for you in your life. I'll leave you with a final quote from Buddha. An idea that is developed and put into action is more important than an idea